Consider this the weekly show for this week. It's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to do a statistical breakdown of the previous games. We're going to do something a little bit different this week. And part of the reason you may not recognize the weekly show as it normally is, because I don't recognize the Carolina Hurricanes that I've seen pretty much all season, but particularly over the last 4 games. The Hurricanes' trip through Canada so far has been an absolute, unmitigated disaster. It's time for some changes to start getting made, be that through trades, changing the lines, and what I think is most important, changing the system with what we already have. I'm going to get into what I believe are the 7 priorities the Carolina Hurricanes should have towards getting back to their game. Because right now, this team went from being a legitimate cup contender to a team that's below the cut line, and everyone's starting to have their doubts. Before getting into those 7 items, let's talk about the situation the Hurricanes are in regards to the standings. The normal thought process is that if you are in a playoff spot by American Thanksgiving, 80% of the time you will make it. This season, you can throw that rule out. Now, the biggest reason I'm showing the conference standings as a whole here, you will notice 5 of the 10 teams ahead of Carolina are in the Atlantic Division. Now, as we look at the wildcard standings, the standings as they are as far as the playoffs go, you'll notice higher point percentages among the Atlantic Division teams, and Atlantic Division teams hold both wildcard spots right now. The good news here is the point standings are pretty tight. If the Hurricanes start stringing some wins together, they'll leapfrog a lot of people really quick, even though other teams have games in hand. There's plenty of hockey left, and the Hurricanes can string some wins together. I don't think they're going to win the division at this point unless the Rangers just totally fall off, but they need to start stringing some wins together because the Atlantic Division is significantly stronger than it was a couple of years ago. It used to be the other way around. The Metropolitan Division was the powerhouse. Now it's the Atlantic Division, and that kind of puts the Hurricanes in a little bit of a tough spot this time around because for them to even make the playoffs, it looks like they're going to have to place within the top 3 in the division. And by no means are they out of it in either scenario where they need to get enough points to be in the wild card spot or get enough points to place within the division. They cannot rest on their laurels right now because they have none. They've got to really get to work here. They've got to start grinding, or this season is going to end in a disaster that is akin to the Hindenburg, as Jack Edwards tried to convey when the Panthers beat the Bruins in the playoffs, but the Scotch would not let him do so coherently. We got to take a look at a couple of disturbing trends here with the Canes that I don't remember us seeing at any point last season. I don't remember them going on a 4-game losing streak. I don't remember it being this many concurrent pathetic efforts as they've had on this road trip. Another troubling trend is that they're 6-10 on the road. If you don't have a good win percentage on the road, and if you can't do it in the playoffs, we saw what happened in 2022. The inability to score on the power play, which is going to be something cited here in a little bit. The inability to score on the power play and the inability to win on the road is the only reason the Hurricanes didn't make it to the conference finals in 2022. Additionally, they're sitting at a negative goal differential of -2, and despite their scoring issues that they've had in the past, I can't tell you the last time that they had a negative goal differential. The one bright spot right here is the Hurricanes are 8-1 at home, but it's not been the most difficult schedule in terms of the teams that they've had to play against. Overall, they are still over 500 with a .537 win percentage. Is not the record that a contending team is supposed to have at any point in the season. This team is definitely not supposed to be in a negative goal differential, and this team is definitely not supposed to be under 500 on the road. Maybe not drastically over 500. It would be good if they got to somewhere between 550 and 600 as far as a road win percentage, but being below 500 on the road is unacceptable and unsustainable. Additionally, the Hurricanes have always been good in the last 10 column, and this time they haven't. And normally the Hurricanes have been really, really good in the last 10 column. Typically, they very rarely are any worse than, say, 6-4-0. Last season, most of the time, they had at least 12 points out of their last possible 20. That's not the case right now with their current last 10 record. So everything that I'm about to talk about is, in fact, in this particular order, and this is just my opinion on it. I know I'm going to get accosted for the first 2 in particular because a lot of people are going to say they're too low on the list. I'm going to construct my argument in a way that you can at least see where I'm coming from, why I've placed these issues in this particular order. All right, coming in as number 7, and I already know I'm going to catch heat for this, but hear me out. The last thing that the Hurricanes need to worry about right now is adding a goal scorer. So I know that a lot of people have been dying for the Hurricanes to add a sniper. In my opinion, we need a right-handed sniper more, but this team has shown in the past that it can score by committee and ultimately win by committee. That's not happening right now for a multitude of reasons. But any goal scorer that you bring in, let's just say theoretically you brought in Patrick Laine in his prime, or you got Vladimir Tarasenko, who's playing a lot better right now, and you got Ottawa to retain 50% salary and send something back their way, considering where they're at in the standings. Any goal scorer that you bring here, not that I think Tarasenko would want to come here anyway, considering what happened in the offseason, what I talked about in one of my previous videos about that. Any goal scorer you bring here, let's say they're a 40 goal scorer, right? They're probably only going to score 30 in Carolina, considering how the Hurricanes system is geared. Now, as I get later in this video, I'm going to talk about some adjustments that I think need to be made to the system. In terms of adding a goal scorer, you run some risk of throwing off the chemistry even more and making the team play worse than it is right now. Granted, forwards typically adapt to new environments faster than defensemen do and significantly faster than what goalies do, but a cautionary tale, and this deserves its own video, and this has actually prompted me to do that, and I'm taking notes about it to do it eventually. It's not going to be a very long one. A cautionary tale of adding pure goal scorers is that a lot of times that's all they bring to the table, and if they're not scoring, they're not very useful. The name that comes to mind when I think of that is Alexander Civian. Any Hurricanes fan that was around back then knows that he was supposed to really help the Hurricanes take a next step. All he did was fleece the Hurricanes for a lot of money and play the weakest, laziest, softest. As far as my list of most hated Hurricanes, Civian is right up there with Noah Hannafin and Ryan Murphy. If you're going to bring a goal scorer in, you need to bring one in that brings something to the table, because they're not going to score a goal every single night. So even if you do get someone who is a quote-unquote pure sniper, a pure sniper who contributes a little bit more to the game for when they're going cold, one that has a decent 200-foot game or at least decent forechecking, maybe some physicality, maybe a good offensive zone defensive stick, something. There needs to be a little bit more than just someone who is supposed to score goals, because Alexander Civian's job was to score goals, and when he was not doing that, he was completely just worthless. For example, Michael Bunting, who was brought in more to be a supplemental depth scorer, still brings physicality and the fact that he's a pest to the lineup and draws a lot of penalties and everything like that. So even when he's not scoring, he's still useful in other ways. We have to get that out of anybody. Carolina has to get that out of anybody that they would potentially bring in. The other big risk with making any trade, and I'll use this to segue into the next one, the risk with making a trade right now is you could mortgage the future, and the Hurricanes, realistically, there's a distinct possibility now that they're not even going to make the playoffs. So that's something the front office needs to think very cautiously about. That segues me into number 6, adding a goaltender. I didn't say this at the time, but when they said Freddie Anderson was having a blood clotting issue, I kind of already said to myself, I think he's done, at least for the season. I was hoping I was wrong, but you may remember Pascal Dupuis that played for the Penguins. A blood clotting issue unfortunately forced him to retire. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Freddie, but I was all but completely convinced that he would be placed on LTIR retroactive to the date that the blood clotting issue took place. That will clear up some cap space for the Hurricanes to go out and get a goaltender. Now, what are 3 things that the Hurricanes would need from any goaltender that they get? Now, these 3 things are also dependent on some of the stuff I'm going to get into later about how the Hurricanes need to get back to their game before any of this is even relevant or helpful at all. 1, you need to have a goalie that can make timely saves. When Carolina is playing right, and they'll get back to it, I have faith they will get back to it. When Carolina is playing right, a goaltender can go 7 minutes without facing any shots, 8 minutes, 10 minutes without facing any shots. And then they go a little bit cold and they finally see some rubber flying at them and they don't know what to do with it. So, first things first, you need the goalie that makes timely saves. Someone who can be down there bored for a few minutes, make a timely save when called upon, and continue to do that over the course of a game when the Hurricanes are playing correctly, when the Hurricanes are playing to their standards. 2, this goalie needs to be durable and consistent. When the Hurricanes are playing correctly, there are some times, not many though, where they'll get hemmed in their own zone, goalie has to face a lot of shots, and has to bail the team out, and ultimately, on some occasions, steal the game for them. And the 3rd thing, once the Hurricanes get back to their game and they're denying zone entries, this has to be a goalie who likes to play the puck and knows how to do it. Someone who will come out, take advantage of the fact the Hurricanes deny a lot of zone entries, and make a really good quick pass to get it back out of the zone, get it up ice, so that way the Hurricanes can use their normally really good transition game to take it the other way and generate scoring chances and do what they do best, which is spend a lot of time in the other team's end. It will be a separate topic regarding what goaltenders I think the Hurricanes could target. Coming to mind are names like John Gibson and Mackenzie Blackwood. When it comes time to really take a look at that, which I'm going to try to do within the next couple of days and make a video, even possibly today, I'll take a look at the numbers, take a look at their play styles, see how aggressively they challenge, see how much they like to play the puck, and see how well they do like with their saves per 60, what their save percentage is, goals against average, all that type of stuff. and then see what you can get out of them and see what type of possibilities there are on the market to improve the goaltending. Kochetkov is not ready yet. I think he'll get there. He's hit a rough patch. And Antti Raanta, even if he was playing incredibly well, which he's playing okay, but he's not playing as well as we've seen him play even earlier this season, he's injury prone, and every time he stretches out to make a big save, I wonder if he's going to get hurt again. When it comes to Raanta, we know he can do it, but how often can he do it? When it comes to Kochetkov, he's at least a 1B. We know he can do it, but is he ready to really take the next big step? The last few games have shown me that he's not. That being said, the defense has been awful, and the goalies are not entirely to blame for anything going on. There's a couple of them I'm sure here and there they would like to have back, both of them. But you cannot solely pin this on them, and the defense needs to start making some changes. So the Hurricanes need to start getting back to doing what they do best before a goaltending discussion even remotely solves this. Adam Gold made a post on X saying that if the Hurricanes would just get a goaltender, the rest of the team will just be fine. Respectfully, I disagree. I think that's a bad take. I think a lot more has to be done than getting a goaltender. And as I go through the rest of this list, I'll construct my argument why getting a goalie and getting a sniper are so far down the list. So coming in at number 5 is fixing the power play. This has been very close to the top of the list for several seasons now. And although it had gotten better, it has since regressed. The power play had gotten a lot better while Trocheck was here. It regressed while he was gone. It improved, regressed, and then improved again with the addition of Shane Goss to spare. And now Dmitry Orlov is finally getting a look on it. We'll see how that works out over the course of time. But I'm not going to talk too much about the power play. That was already a known issue, but now, thanks to everything else that I'm about to mention, it's not a high priority to fix anymore. This is something that maybe could be mitigated by a personnel change or maybe by a system change. But scoring on the power play needs to be supplemental. It needs to be something that you can use. It needs to be used as a way to edge out your opponents. It should be a strength to the game, but not a pillar. And that's not just relevant to the Hurricanes. That's relevant to everybody's special teams while they're important. You can go an entire game, albeit it's rare, you can go an entire game without a special team situation. It's a distinct possibility that penalties don't get called on either side. Prioritizing anything above the Hurricanes' issues 5-on-5 right now, you can't really do. Segueing into number 4, which is also a special team situation, is getting the penalty kill back to where it needs to go. The penalty kill was a staple of the Hurricanes game and just announced to the league all over again. When it came to having a defense-first structure, there was nobody better than the Carolina Hurricanes. The penalty kill was not only a strength of the Hurricanes, it very often changed momentum in games. Even the league's top power plays hated going up against the Hurricanes' penalty kill last season because of how good it was. They could hold a box formation, they could hold a diamond formation, they knew when to challenge at the right times, and they generated their fair share of offense shorthanded as well. They utilized their depth with how good all the forwards are defensively and how good the top 4 was last season. That has not been there this season. It is probably the most uncharacteristic thing, other than the lack of ability to get the puck back on dump-ins that we have seen out of the Hurricanes this season, and the lack of effort. If the Hurricanes get the penalty kill back up to standard, I feel like that would have a very large ripple effect, and it would start helping out the confidence of the team as a whole. That more than anything would be the biggest thing I think that they could do towards getting back to their identity, towards getting out of this mental rut, getting themselves going, starting to get where they were on the penalty kill again will remind everybody of the Hurricanes' identity, and no one needs that worse than the Hurricanes right now. Coming in at number 3, get back to playing that good 200-foot game that the Hurricanes had 5-on-5 that absolutely suffocated teams anytime that they had possession of the puck and contributed to really good neutral zone transition. Over the last few games in particular, but pretty much the whole season, the Hurricanes have looked lackadaisical, out of sync, and they've not been able to do what they have been doing for so many years now of being probably the most annoying team to play against. Over the past few seasons, if you were going to beat the Carolina Hurricanes, you at least were going to get annoyed in the process. They prevented a lot of breakouts, they pinched a lot, they kept pucks in, they gapped up in the neutral zone, they denied entry, and then when you did get down in the defensive zone, they held their defensive positioning really well. They played a man-on-man game, and they would get back out really quick. The defense went anew to jump in the rush to generate more scoring chances. It was like everywhere you looked, the opposite color sweater was there if you were playing against the Hurricanes. Anytime that you tried to make a pass, tried to join a rush, tried to open up some open ice, you had to work for it. The Hurricanes have won a lot of games through war of attrition, and right now they're not making wars of attrition. Games that they should be turning into chess matches or turning into track meets, and it's costing them. This may be part of the whole symptom when Rod Brindamore and Steph Nason were talking about a lack of buy-in, but I have to have some criticism of the system 5-on-5 as well. It is a very arduous system, and maybe it's starting to get to some guys. Particularly, it's starting to get to more of the skilled players. There are times where you see it looks like later on in the season, a lot of players, we saw it last season before they kind of picked it back up going into the playoffs. Guys look like they're tired. They look like they're exhausted. And trust me, that's not from a lack of conditioning. The Hurricanes might be the best conditioned team in the National Hockey League. You know what they say? You've got Billy after every single game. But how well they play 5-on-5 as far as preventing the other team's transition and then spending a lot of time in the offensive zone, even though they're losing more games even when they are doing that than they were before. It's the foundation of the Carolina Hurricanes. They have to get back to it. And while I do believe the foundation of this system is excellent, it has been proven that it works, it has its flaws, and this brings me to number 2. It is time to make some adjustments to the system. Some of the top players have been criticized for how little they're scoring, but in a lot of ways, it's not their fault. The Hurricane system in the offensive zone is all about puck retrieval with numbers and generating scoring chances and forechecking and creating chances by way of constant puck possession through temporary loss of possession. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's a fancy way of saying play, dump, and chase, exemplify the chase part, and then generate scoring chances from there. I can see why that may be starting to frustrate players like Sebastian Aho, Teuvo Teravainen, and Andrei Svechnikov. I can understand why that might be starting to bug them a little bit. They're high-skilled guys, and they want to play a high-skilled game, and there's no reason that I don't see any reason why the system can't be adjusted to account for that. That's not to say that the forechecking should go away entirely. It's proven that it works, but the other problem with it is a simple, yet incredibly effective, yet simple brand of hockey. I've kind of started to figure it out. They know that the overwhelming likeliness is if they're playing against the Hurricanes, they're going to face more dump-ins than any other team. This allows teams to adjust their defensive zone strategy to focus on puck retrieval and getting it out of the zone, really putting an emphasis on denying entry because they know the Hurricanes are more than likely going to dump the puck in anyway. What it comes down to is if a team is playing against the Hurricanes, and if they're really good at executing zone exits, the Hurricanes aren't going to spend a whole lot of time in their end, and they are far more likely to lose a game where they don't have a ton of possession. I'm not the biggest believer in Corsi, but the numbers don't lie. The Hurricanes have a ton of time of possession. They generate plenty of high-danger chances, but they don't finish on nearly enough of them. The simplicity of the system, while effective, is not gelling entirely with the top 6 forwards in particular, and it may be time to change how the system approaches certain players versus others. Martin Stahl, Foss line, go ahead and have that one keep playing the same way. I think Drury's skill gives him a little bit more of a ceiling than those guys, but Steph Nason is the epitome of Hurricanes hockey as it's supposed to be right now, and the numbers reflect that. And to tie it in with the other points that I've already made, improved goaltending will mean nothing if the rest of the team doesn't start playing well in front of them. Adding a sniper will mean nothing if there's no adjustments made to the system to allow the sniper to have time, space, and positioning that they would need to be able to get clean looks at the net and get shots off. Without improving power play and penalty kill, special teams has to be improved all across the board, but they need to start with the penalty kill and then get the power play going again. But I think it starts with the penalty kill since the Hurricanes are a defense-first team. It's proven that it works, but the system needs adjustment. Additionally, they need to get back to being that annoying team to play against 5-on-5. They have that psychological element of an opposing team going on the power play and them knowing that they're not likely to score, and getting the Hurricanes get their power play going again to add another element of scoring, add another way to make a difference in a game, and have another way to edge your opponent out. Any goaltender you would have would need to have confidence in the guys in front of him, and if they get all that stuff together and you bring in a good enough goaltender, the confidence of everybody in front of him is going to surge. It'll have a mutually beneficial effect, and the team will be back on track. Now, this was something I started to talk about the previous 2 times I attempted to record this video, but I wanted to structure the argument in the way that I have structured it, and this is number 1 that the Hurricanes have to do. Whatever problems there are in the locker room, and they have apparently had a closed-door meeting since then, whatever problems there are in the locker room, they need to straighten them out at any cost. If that means making some trades, if that means healthy scratching some people, if that means calling up a couple of guys from the minors, particularly Ponomarev, I think would be the number 1 candidate right now. Get them in the lineup if you need to. Start sending a message. If you can make a trade or scratch somebody, let them know nobody's safe, nobody's staying in the lineup. You have to earn it. You have to earn your right to be here. We know this team, its core players and its depth players can get it done. We saw it all last season. We saw them end 2 playoff series in ways that they were not ending them before. They were starting to win on the road. They started winning in overtime. They started scoring power play goals. I expected the series with New Jersey to go to 7 games, and they ended it in 5, and they basically dismantled them in every game except Game 3. Now, the 2 names that have been thrown out the most is what people think that they're talking about with guys not pulling their weight. Pesce has been mentioned a lot. Necas has been mentioned a lot. When it comes to Brett Pesce, I think one of the problems is he made it abundantly clear in his exit interview that he wanted to be a Hurricane for life, and the deal didn't get done. There may or may not have been a trade in place, judging by the multitude of things that I've read that may or may not be true, and it fell through. So now he's got that uncertainty of not having a contract for next season. Make no mistake, Brett Pesce will find a job, and Brett Pesce will get a raise. But now he has to wonder if that's coming from Carolina. Does he have to move all of his stuff to somewhere else? And, people say, well, these guys are millionaires. It's still stressful on them. Because once a lot of these guys are done playing hockey, they don't do anything else. Out of everybody that graces NHL ice, very few of them go on to be broadcasters or scouts or work in the front office or general managers or coaches. It's a pretty limited job opportunity base once you get done playing, not to mention you're going to be nursing injuries for the rest of your life. And people often say, why don't they go focus on getting an education and using that? A lot of times they have concussion issues and everything like that may mitigate their ability to be able to learn. Their livelihood depends on their next contract, and the next one Brett Pesce is going to get is going to be the most important in terms of his financial stability for the rest of his life. Next, Martin Necas has been cited a lot lately. I've also thought that he looks off. And if there's one player on this team that seems to maybe not fit in with the system that Rod Brind'Amour has, it's probably Martin Necas. He's an incredible skater. He's all about creative playmaking and doing great things with puck possession. But that's a very hit or miss thing. It's very inconsistent at times. There's times where he tries to walk it through 3 guys at the blue line and doesn't get it done, where it would be more advantageous to just dump the puck in than to give up a turn, than to turn it over. So that's something that I think that maybe the Hurricanes need to start exploring. The Hurricanes maybe need to start exploring moving him. I hate to give up on a player with that much talent, but so long as they're going to play this type of system, Necas is not going to be someone who I think ultimately fits. He's an amazing hockey player. He's one of the best skaters I've ever seen by far. But his contract might be attractive to a lot of teams just out of the simple fact he's an RFA, and they would have a little bit more control over his future and being able to sign him. Now, here's one of the other things, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this topic has been done to death. Because before it was, should Chatfield or DeAngelo be in the lineup? I said that the Chatfield and Orlov pair would be better, and that DeAngelo and Orlov were not going to work out. And while it does look more and more likely that DeAngelo is going to get traded, I would rather have him in the lineup than Brett Pesce right now. Yeah, Tony's a traffic cone at times, but he's a traffic cone that forces a lot of icings from where he pinches aggressively. He's good at zone exits. He's good at positioning himself for outlet passes to bump the puck up through the neutral zone. He helps the transition game out. And when it comes to being a puck distributor, he's probably one of the best ones on the team. And I think that he would work out well with Shea. I've actually looked at their numbers on Natural Stat Trick. For a small sample size, they're pretty good. You would need more to make a definitive determination. But we also live in a world where people are still blaming him and Brendan Lemieux for the quote-unquote locker room issues. And Tony DeAngelo has not been in the lineup since November 18th. And Brendan Lemieux has only been in the lineup recently because of Andrei Svechnikov being injured and or having the flu. Brings me to one more thing that I'm going to discuss. Apparently the flu is going around in the NHL right now, and once one person gets it, everybody gets it. That may be a contributing factor, and while it is something to be taken into consideration, it's not an excuse for all the problems that it seems like the Hurricanes are having, that maybe this was stuff that was going on before that has finally boiled over. The first time I made a video talking about the negative vibes I had about the Canes, it was after they lost to Tampa the first time. But now I'm getting those vibes again, and they're even more harsh. But in my opinion, that's the order that things need to be fixed in, because right now everybody's wanting to pick out their new favorite scapegoat, since their other favorite scapegoats are typically in the press box, but they're still trying to find a way to blame them. So if we're going to have a discussion about what the problems are, don't waste your time blaming DeAngelo and Lemieux. They can't be a part of the problem at this point because they're not even part of the equation. So that's all I've got for this video. I'm hoping that they get this stuff straightened out because it's getting really frustrating. I may have another video out today, and I may also have a special guest. Wait and stay tuned. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please hit like, comment, share, and subscribe. Please consider donating to my Buy Me a Coffee. The link will be in the description. Thank you very much. Y'all take care, and I will see you next time.